The Orlando Magic are at the All-Star break. So it's a good time to take a step back, reflect on where the Magic are this season, and where they are set to go. So much to get to. It's a good episode. It's a good day for an episode of Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today will be February 16th, 2023. My name is Philip Rossreich. I'm the expert and site editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we take a step back and reflect on where the Magic are at the All-Star break. We're joined by Luke Duffy, my co-site expert over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. We'll get to all kinds of things about the Magic. Have they met the expectations for the season? How do they take that next step further? And what is next for Paolo Banchero, Markelle Fultz, Franz Wagner, Jamal Mosley? What's next for this whole team? We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. The Orlando Magic are officially at the All-Star break now, sitting at a record of 24-35. Certainly a record better than I think a lot of us would hope for, but also a record that is not quite where we want it to be right now either. The Magic are, at least as of entering Thursday's games, I think there's a big game Thursday between two teams ahead of the Magic, Pacers and the Bulls, I believe. The Magic are 4 games back of the Washington Wizards for the final play-in spot, and while that is a pretty sizable gap to climb, it's not impossible, as the 2019 team showed. We will chat with Luke Duffy of Orlando Magic Daily here on the other side, and one of the big things we talk about is how expectations have changed for the Orlando Magic. So enjoy our conversation with Luke Duffy coming up next. And I am joined now by my co-site expert over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Joined us here, but has been writing about the Magic for a really long time now. It's our good friend, Luke Duffy. Luke, how you doing, my man?
Not too bad at all, Phil. Thank you so much for having me on today. Very much looking forward to talking about the Magic. And yeah, we get a chance to pause now for All-Star break and just to sort of assess where they're at, and looking forward to getting into it with you, man.
Yeah, it's been a wild and exciting season. You know, I don't know what your expectations were for the year. I had them at I'll say this publicly. Please, everyone, freezing cold, take me and drag me. I had the team at 29 wins, and that was more because I was expecting late season chicanery. But sitting here now at 24-35 at the All-Star break, what has this team first met your expectations so far, and what are your overall impressions for this team so far this season, now nearing at the All-Star break, nearing the final quarter of the year?
Well, I suppose first of all, I was, when I say cautiously optimistic at the start of the season, I didn't anticipate a 5-20 start. I'll put it to you that way. And when that happened, I really did expect the worst, and I was probably, and you talk about freezing cold takes, I was probably dragged a little bit for saying, if the front office decide to certainly not blow this up, but if they get a little bit more creative around the deadline, it wouldn't have surprised me. Obviously, that was proven to not be the case. And yet, I just also felt, and this is where the cautious optimism comes in, I think there were even moments in those 5-20 games, whether it was defensive stretches, more so defensive for me anyways, where I just felt something there. We're a long way off seeing it properly, but there's something there. And then the absolute individual brilliance of Banchero and Franz Wagner, not that they paper over any cracks, but I think they were just so great to watch develop that, to me, it didn't even mind that the losses were piling up, because I could see in these two, at least, as well as other players we'll get into, that there's definitely something here, and it excited me. So yeah, I didn't anticipate such a bad start, but they've rebounded very well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone anticipated that 5-20 start, and I think we were, I know I took the team to task. I'm sure a lot of fans would agree with this. Like the goal was to quote unquote level up. Like that was the
Mm-hmm.
rallying cry. That was kind of the line that was pushed out by Jamal Mosley, by coach and by the team throughout the offseason. And it was tough to see it in those early days, and obviously injuries played such a huge role. The Magic played a good chunk of the first quarter of the season without any point guards, with Markelle Fultz out with the broken toe, with Cole Anthony dealing with the oblique injury. It was just really, really tough. And as good as Franz looked, as good as Paolo Banchero looked, you wanted to see the results. And I think that, even now, that's kind of the tension with this team, even though they're winning a lot more, is that everyone wants to see this team, like everyone loves the process, and the process is really important, but we all want to see the results. We're all kind of immediate gratification people. And or that early part of the season, like you said, you could see hints
Mm-hmm.
of what this team could do. We talked a lot. I remember early in the season talked a lot about, hey, they're not getting blown out. Like the first maybe 10, 12, 15 games, there's maybe one game where they lost by more than 15 points or something like that. And obviously those blowouts kind of came, and the team got overwhelmed, and it was frustrating at that point. And everyone's questioning, like, is this the right thing? Do we have the right players? Clearly we have something in Paolo and Franz, but what about everybody else? And, I think it's a credit to this front office, a credit to this team and this coaching staff, that they stayed the course, that they stayed patient with it. And they said, hey, keep doing the right things, keep building the right things. It'll come around for us. We'll figure it out. We'll bounce back. And, I found it really impressive to see how this team recovered. And look, they're 4 games out of the play-in tournament as we record this on Wednesday afternoon on the East Coast. But that 5-20 start's probably what's going to cost them a play-in spot at this juncture. But it's still really impressive me to watch how this team has grown. And Steve Clifford used to say this all the time. You want to get better as the season progresses. You want to be playing your best basketball toward the end of the season. The Magic seem very much on that track. And so, I think the question that, we kind of start with as we reflect back is, can we consider the season a success already? Like, do you consider, season ends tomorrow, or, the Magic go 500 the rest of the way? If the Magic go 500 the rest of the way, I think they'd be 34, 35 wins. Bare bones stuff, but does that make the season a success before we get into anything else that could happen the rest of the year?
Well, in a vacuum, when you put it like that, I think it does, because that 34, 35 wins is well over any estimate that anybody had for them before the season started. I know they've obviously beaten last year's win total recently as well. So yes, and yet, maybe if this is slightly more negative, but games, and it's my biggest criticism, I suppose, of the team at this stage of the season. The inconsistencies and inabilities to get themselves up for certain games. And I look, it's 82 game season. It's so hard. It's hard to do anything consistently, and they're a young team and they're growing. And Coach Mosley is obviously trying to get across his game plan all the time. But just, it can be maddening. It can be so frustrating when you see them roll off a few impressive wins, beat the Celtics 3 times, even the game against the Raptors last night, the first quarter, first 7 minutes maybe, thinking like, okay, this looks like it's pretty much a healthy roster now. Everything's looking good. They're focused. They're locked in, and it's just one that gets away from them. And I think last night's loss was quite a, well, we'll probably come back to that, but just that was not a great loss. But just, yeah, I mean, I suppose, yes, to answer your question, Phil, I would consider this a success if the season ended today, just because it's clear there's a path that they're on. It's clear that the team have grown and gotten better. It's clear that after the rough start, that as Coach Clifford used to say, they're playing better basketball at this stage of the season. But what it's like a niggle in the back of my head is, it's just the inconsistencies can just be frustrating. And I know health has played such a part in that, and we'll touch on health as well. But that will be my biggest concern, and will likely be my biggest takeaway, or negative takeaway rather, when this season is over, is how they didn't have it sometimes when they should have.
I honestly think like that's the healthy response. Like honestly, like
Yeah.
I think that's like the healthy way to look at this year and what the Magic have done because I mean you're right. Like you're right. They've already surpassed last year's win total. They're even if they kind of stay on the pace they're at, they're gonna blow that away. They're gonna do a lot better than everyone thought. They're gonna destroy their Vegas over under for sure. But at
Hmm.
the same time, like, and this is something I've been thinking a lot about of late is like every player on the roster talks about the play-in tournament. I think we finally got Jamal Mosley to say that yes, we know what's going on in the playoffs chase, and again that's why Tuesday's loss felt so big was
Hmm.
because you couldn't build on a good win in Chicago. To your point about the inconsistency, the Magic I think are 1-10 or 1-11 on the second night of back-to-backs this year. They're a good defensive team, but on the second night of back-to-backs they give up 122 points per 100 possessions. Like they're getting smoked. When there's just a little thing off, like that is a cause for concern. And look, young teams struggle with consistency. Like I say that a lot to everyone is, the regular season is about what can you do on every night. What are you going to do on a random night, on a random Tuesday in February when you're tired, you've been on the road for a long time, you see the All-Star break coming. Like, what do you rely on? And I think this team is still figuring that out. And so, again, something I've been thinking a lot about lately is, we've gotten more serious about the play and chase as we're looking at this team fully healthy and what they can do. Like the expectations have raised up another level. Like that this team is expected to do more. And so, and I'm all for that. I think expectations should shift through the course of the year. Like you always remember what the overarching goal was back in October, but the team you have in February, March, and April is very different than the team you have in October. Things evolve and they change. And so you understand what those October goals were, and the Magic have largely hit those. But now there are new goals to achieve. Now there are new things to accomplish and new things to learn and grow with. And so I think it's very natural and I think healthy, honestly, to look at this team and say, like, yes, they've accomplished a lot, but we expect them to do more now. Like they've earned the respect to say, hey, you got to beat Detroit on next Thursday. Like
Hmm.
you can't go down 0-3 to Detroit. Like opening night loss, those are random, like whatever. But those two games against the Pistons, losing a fourth quarter lead against the Knicks, losing a fourth quarter lead against the Heat, like yes, those are good learning moments and really important in really charged atmospheres at home where this team failed and now they have to kind of figure out how do we succeed in the situation. But at the same time, those are games that cost you. Like we're going to look back at the end of the season in mid-April. Magic may miss the play-in tournament by 3 games, which again leaves us only 3 games that don't mean anything, which will be
Hmm.
really healthy for this team. But we're going to look back and say, lost a game to the Rockets at home where they didn't show up, where they didn't defend well, lost a game to the Heat when they were up 17 and didn't trail until overtime. Lost 2 games to the Pistons. Lost a game to the Hornets, got blown out at home against the Hornets. Like, I think one of the more important lessons that the team's going to learn this year, and they may not understand this until they get to the end of the season, look back and say, like, we should have been more prepared. We should have been more focused. We should have valued this game more because it ultimately cost us our goals and our dreams and what we wanted to accomplish. Like I think it's healthy to say, like, yeah, this team is good, but we know they can be better. We know they can do a whole lot more. And again, honestly, like, I see that as a sign of progress and a sign of success as much as anything else. But now, they've gone up a level. Now they're trying to get up another level. And of course, there's another level beyond that of being a home court team, of, being a real contender in the East rather than just trying to get playoff experience, which is what this team is going for. So I actually think that's a really, really healthy thing. And again, just a sign of how successful this group has been.
Yeah, and I think earlier on, it's probably a phrase I rely on as a crutch sometimes when even writing. But it almost felt like found money at the start of the year, even though they were losing. But it was like, well, Banchero, we can whatever way you want to say his surname, but he's looking unbelievable. He's rookie of the year. Give it to him now. Ball was like, it was like, this is just so unexpected. It's fantastic, and it all just felt like, hey, we're losing. God, this is a bit of fun, and we can see that things are going well. Oh, sorry, things could go well and could progress. But you're right. Now that we've hit February, March, it's like, okay, well, the shine's gone off ball a little bit, and we know how good some of the young players are. So the expectations go up a level, and I mean it's not a fun place to be at. And maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit, because the example I always think of, going back a couple of years, is when the Brooklyn Nets, led by D'Angelo Russell, were in the playoffs, and it's such a fun, like, nobody expected us to be here. This is great vibe, and the Magic, I still think they're somewhat in there. We're getting to the point now where you're right, expectations are changing, and they are moving up a level. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how they respond to that, because, like, again, to this point, at times they haven't always properly. Again, that's just, and what's really annoying is, or really annoying for me, anyways, to witness. Sorry, I know I'm not on behalf of the
No,
whole
I
fan
mean,
base now, but
it's
it's sorry.
like I said, it's healthy to be annoyed, because we've seen how good this, we're like, a lot of us, I think, feel like proud parents, like our kids are growing up, but now that they've shown us they can be responsible adults, when they do something stupid, we get upset with them.
Yeah, and like, you got like the win streak from earlier in the season. Again, I know the three Celtics wins. You're like, God, this can be so good, and this is ahead of schedule, and this is brilliant. And then it's the Detroit, like the Charlotte at home, or losing to the Pistons, and you're like, oh, really? We've regressed in the space of 24, 48 hours. We've gone all the way back here. Like, really? No team's gonna have it every night. And if there's one thing that maybe I think sometimes I need to maybe get off social media a little bit, game to game, the sensationalism of all fan bases, by the way. It's not just Magic, of course. This is the best player in the world versus we need to trade this guy after one bad game. I stay away from all of that, because, look, it's a team that grows and should be given the chance to grow. Yeah, there are times when it has frustrated. But then, again, to put a positive spin on the Phil, still, at this stage, as we take a breath, I'm happy. I say that through a bit of a grimace. I'm happy with where the Magic are right now after the season that it's been so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think I made this point earlier on Wednesday. The Magic are, I think the Magic are going to pass Indiana. I think at the very least, they're going to get by Indiana. If you're looking for a big game, next Saturday at the Amway Center, Magic Pacers, I believe, humongous game. Like, that is, if you're trying to make the play-in tournament, yes, we're chasing Washington, yes, we're chasing Toronto, yes, we're chasing Chicago. We got to climb over Indiana. We got a few other teams we got to climb over before we get to that 10 spot. And the 4 games is big in its own. It's the other teams you got to climb over too. That also makes it really, really, really tough. And so I think that Orlando's going to get over Indiana. There are still people that talk about the draft. I will say this. The Magic are probably going to end up with the 6th or 7th best lottery odds. That's still a really good spot to be in. They'll probably end up with like the 7th, 8th, or 9th pick, and the 7th, 8th, and 9th pick in the draft this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how everything pans out for the Magic here, and how this group comes together, and what they do to take those next steps that are all important. Let's take a quick break from our conversation to talk a little bit about FanDuel Sportsbook. The midway point of the NBA season is here. We're at the break. We're ready to take a nice exhale. No, we're not. We're ready to get into the action, and so it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drain. You can bet on whether Paolo Banchero and team rookies will win the skills challenge, whether Paolo will win Rookie of the Year, or the Rising Stars MVP 2. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Obviously, Luke, I think one of the big things that changed for this team is Paolo Banchero. We've already talked about him a lot and talked about how he is by far the rookie of the year. But what's the one thing about Banchero that stands out most to you that has really kind of helped this team evolve?
A couple of things stand out. From day one, it's like, and I know it's probably been said, well, has been said, it's like he's a man already. I mean, he doesn't look in any way out of place. He never looks overawed. But the one thing I guess is like, you give him the ball with 5 or 6 seconds left in a shot clock, if you have to. It's not, you just don't panic. Well, I certainly don't. Even if it doesn't go in, even if he'll make something happen. And I know that's not how you want an offense to run, to just give it to him and hope for the best. But I'm never in any way panicked or unsure when he has the ball. It's like, okay, he might find a cutter. He might pass it up for somebody else. He might take the shot on himself. I'm fine with all of it. He can do, in my mind, he can do no wrong. So, yeah, I mean, you think about where this team was before, and it seemed like they tried for so long to shoehorn Evan Fournier into being some sort of closer or some sort of like, this is the guy we turn to when we need a bucket, and he just
a shot maker.
Yeah, you're exactly, and maybe we're so starved, or had been so starved for that to see him come in and so effortlessly as a rookie, just be like, it's grand. I have this. If you need me to do this, it might not always work, and I'm gonna. Obviously, he had a bit of a rookie slump, as we know. Like I think he's coming through that now. But even at that, what we would consider his rookie wall is what most rookies would consider a good stretch of games. So like, yeah, he's been unbelievable, and it's so amazing to think that. I think he'd be an all-star next year. I'd nearly go on record and say that now. I might be proven wrong, but it was too soon this year. But the fact his numbers were somewhat there, just is testament to who he is. So he's the guy, in my opinion, and I have every faith that as long as he's on this team, good things are going to happen.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I think the thing that Banchero has changed about this team is they do just have a guy that they can dump the ball to, and he will create a shot. We've seen him make wild shots. Honestly, I think a lot of his struggles this year have been twofold. One, him figuring out what a good shot is and what kind of shots he can take and make consistently in this league, and what it's going to take to get to a spot. So honestly, I look at every failure from Paolo as like a sign of like, okay, he's going to get that the next time, or he's going to know, hey, I have to work on this particular shot or this particular pattern to be more successful next year. The other thing is like his ability to get to the line, I think has transformed the Magic. Like,
is he still
like his bad games?
He's top. Sorry to cut across. Is he still? I believe he's top 20 in the league. I mean, he was nearly top 10 at one point.
He might.
He was 7.7 a game.
I know he's dipped under 8 attempts per game, which was kind of like the Magic number for a while. But like the Magic since Dwight Howard left have been a bottom 5 team in free throw rate every single year. I would maybe they stuck out of the bottom 5 one year of those, but they've struggled to get to the foul line. That's such a huge thing. And if you're the Magic still have one of the worst offenses in the league. They're still, I think, bottom 10 in the league in offensive rating, but like, for a team that didn't have a guy that could create his own shot and had to rely on each other, not being able to get free throws was such a drain on the offense. It was just such a, like, you couldn't do anything. It was just really hard for this team to operate. And so all of a sudden, the Magic have gone from one of the worst free throw getting teams in the league, not shooting teams. They've gone through a little bit of struggle here, but they've been okay. They've gone from one of the worst free throw getting teams in the league to like 3rd, 4th, or 5th. Like they'll bounce between 3, 4, and 5 depending on the game. Their free throw rate's been hovering around 30% for most of the season. Like they're getting a free throw for 3 out of every 10 field goal attempts they get. Like that'd be 6 out of every 20 6 free throw, 1 trip to the line for every 15, 20 shots they take. 2 free throws essentially. That is just an incredible rate. That's just such an incredible turnaround. And, as this team adds more offensive weapons, like when the bench really started getting going and when this group is really settled in, you see how this team's offense takes off because they can constantly put pressure on the basket. Now, like I would argue the biggest problem for the Magic is the lack of diversity. They're not a great 3-point shooting team. They don't have a lot of great mid-range jump shooters. Paolo isn't quite the mid-range jump shooter yet that he's going to be. And so, the Magic lack diversity. If they're not getting to the basket, if they're not getting to the foul line, they're going to struggle. And, we saw this last night in Toronto. The Raptors did a really good job walling off the paint. We saw this against Miami. Like Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler are great at just being physical without fouling and keeping you from the paint. You can just kind of see the frustration because the Magic just have one way that they can beat you offensively right now in the half court, at least. And honestly, a lot of it is that's Paolo's personality. Paolo's personality is he can bull his way to the basket because he's so big and strong, or he's going to get to the foul line. And so you like seeing your team take on the offensive personality of your best player, and everyone follows suit. Everyone gets energy from it, and everyone's doing it too. Like Franz can get to the basket, Cole can get to the basket, Markelle can get to the basket. Wendell has that nice kind of fake spin move that he does from the elbow that gets him to the basket. Like this, like for the first, like what Paolo was given this team, I think for the first time in a long time, is a just clear cut offensive identity. And it's again, we're just planting seeds this year. It's something that this team can grow from. And, I know I tell this to everyone every time Paolo has a bad game, and a bad game for him is like 13 points on 5 for 18 shooting. I'm like, this is the worst Paolo's ever going to be.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to take everything he's learned this year. He's going to get better. And teams are doubling him like crazy still. There's not as much as they were maybe in January, but teams are still putting a lot of defensive focus and attention on him. And he's a rookie who doesn't know how to handle it yet. Once he learns how to do that, adds a 3-point shot, especially, it's going to be game over for a lot of the league.
Yeah. And like he didn't have a lot of like a healthy roster alongside him. Thankfully, he's been mostly healthy himself, which has been great. But now that he has like the full complement of, nearly the full complement of teammates around him, like, yeah, you can already see that good things are happening. And I hope over the course of this that we'll get to speak about Markelle Fultz a little bit. I'm sure we will, because even you can just see him being on the court with Paolo and other players. It's just such a help. And I think having a real point guard like that alongside Paolo as they grow together, yeah, I don't want to quite go far and say the sky is the limit right now, but it has me very optimistic about what the next couple of years can look like.
Just want to take a quick break from the conversation here to tell you what's coming up on Locked On Magic tomorrow. Terrence Ross is officially a member of the Phoenix Suns. I know, it's weird to say. We're going to talk about Terrence Ross's legacy with the Orlando Magic, what he meant to Orlando, and where the team finds shooting moving forward. We'll get into some of that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic to wrap up the week. Until then, enjoy the rest of our conversation with Luke Duffy of OrlandoMagicDaily.com. So let's get into Markelle Fultz then. Let's talk a little bit Markelle, because I think right now everyone is talking about him because like he's clearly shining with Paolo and Franz going through their little slump right now. But I think there's still some questions about whether he's ultimately the answer at point guard. I think it's very clear how important Markelle is. Like we mark time this season based on when Markelle and Cole came back. I think that was November 20. It was late November when they came back against the Hawks. The losing streak ended December 7th is kind of when we start counting time. It's like my Northwestern Wildcats, nothing before 1995 ever happened. I think people forget how young Markelle still is. And like, regardless of what happened earlier in his career, this guy still has number one pick talent. And he's really starting to show it now that he's gotten healthy and he's kind of figured it out. What are the next steps for Markelle and what do the Magic need from him? How important is he to this team and this team's development? And is there a concern that, the Magic that he's not a shooter yet, or he's a willing shooter, but he's not a good shooter yet? Is there still concern there about what this team can be, when they do start competing for something real?
Well, I like the fact he at least takes them now, even if it doesn't always look particularly pretty. I don't treat quite as much as I used to. And look, we all love to, I think, or call something correctly. We like to brag about it. So I just want to go on the record here and say, I at times did think Fultz was done with this team. I didn't see, because of his injuries and because I just didn't know if he was a long-term solution. I've absolutely changed my tune on that. I believe he can be. He's 23, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's 23 or 24.
24, yeah, something like that.
24,
Yeah,
24.
there's Gary Harris is the oldest player on this team at 28. Every one
Yeah,
of these
28.
guys are babies. They're all
Exactly.
children.
So, and I said recently, like at this stage, isn't it crazy to think like he's by far he's a better player than Ben Simmons. Now I know we need to move past that. They can't just be linked at the hip forever. But I mean, if you'd have said that 2 years ago, 18 months ago, that Markel Fultz is the better of those two players, a lot of people would have called you crazy. So yeah, I'm willing to give him every chance to be the long term solution as a point guard. I have no problems if it ends up that for the foreseeable future it is him running the show. And again, I have changed my tune on that considerably because I did not think that was going to be the case. He's
Yeah.
there's a sense of calm and poise when he has the ball. He, even if it doesn't work out, I always feel like he's trying to make the right decisions, tries to get teammates going, and looking at it as another positive. Alongside Suggs, especially, I really think there's the very very early stages, but them as a tandem, I really believe that can work as well. And then maybe I'm being overly optimistic now, but I see good things there. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that does go really underrated is that the game management that he
Mm-hmm.
brings. Like he knows how to and when to push the pace in the right ways. Like knowing just taking the ball and going and getting up the court quicker and just he's just really good at planting himself in the paint. That mid range jumper, like everyone who says he's not a good jump shooter, I'm like, no, he's not a good 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
He's a really good mid range shooter. Like his
Mm-hmm.
pull up game is really good. And I'm like, again, like I said earlier, I think the biggest thing missing is offensive diversity. Like the Magic need multiple ways they can attack you, and that means someone's got to hit a pull up jumper. Like Markel Fultz can hit one. I like Franz doing it. I wish Franz would do it more. Paolo is certainly going to get there, and then you add some 3-point shooting, and again, that some of it is Paolo being a better 3-point shooter. Teams are happy to let center shoot, so Wendell's got to continue to hit from
Mm-hmm.
deep too. Markel does so many things, and he passes guys open, and that's something that doesn't get seen in a stat sheet and a scorebook. He gets other guys open and gets and like is the heartbeat of this team. Like honestly, like I think the biggest issue with Markel sometimes is he's a little sloppy. Like he tries to be a little too adventurous sometimes, and not in
Mm-hmm.
a way that like Jalen Suggs is, where he's just going 100 miles an hour, slamming into a brick wall, and falling and needing to readjust the rubber bands that hold him together. But like Markel will try a pass that's in a window that's not there, that really only he could see, or he won't have the energy. And I think some of that is so much of this team is just young. Like I hate to say it this way, but like so many of the problems that we see with this team are just like, well, that's just what young teams do. Like young teams are inconsistent. They get up for the Celtics, they don't get up for the Pistons. No offense to Detroit. Like those teams don't understand the value of every single game. So honestly, like I love for the Magic make the play-in tournament. I think they get a lot of value from playing, even if they lose that 9-10 game. Feeling the pressure of a do or die game would be so huge for this group. But by the same token, I think it would be valuable to fall short and to say like, oh, we need to value every game because every game matters. We drop games. We could point, like, I loved what I heard from, I think it was Jalen Suggs after Tuesday's loss to the Raptors, where he's like, credit to the Raptors. They played hard. They did all the right things. The mistakes were our own. We got lazy with turnovers. We didn't defend. We didn't dig out rebounds. We know it's on us. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. It's on us to play better. And so much of some of these teams' issues, like the focus for a full 48 minutes, the consistency game to game, the understanding of what it takes to win. So much of that gets fixed with experience. And so, I think one of the big lessons from this season is the value of patience. We live in a society where we can access anything immediately. And, I think NBA fans are a lot smarter now and understanding of like what it takes to win a championship. That's, I think, where the tank culture comes from a little bit. Like they're not idiots, that they have a point. But but like I know I encounter a lot of people in mentions that want the results immediately, and I'm just like I have friends and family that will say like, why are the Magic struggling so much? It's just like they're working through the process. You got to give them the opportunity. Like Jamal Mosley, I think, makes some game management mistakes, but they're game management mistakes if you're trying to win immediately. If you're trying to build and grow and develop and think about like we're playing not for this year, we're playing for what we're going to experience next year. Some of those failures are fine. Like the Miami game, if the Magic wanted to win that game, the ball would have been in Markelle Fultz's hands at the end of the game. They put the ball in Paolo Banchero's hands, and Banchero made mistakes. And it sucks to lose that game. That's a game you want to win, but if Paolo Banchero gets into a situation later in the year or next year against Miami where he has a ball in his hands and has to close, he's going to be more prepared to do it now. And I think that's the development mindset that the Magic still have. But so much of the season is about patience, like waiting on Markelle Fultz to kind of have this moment click for him. People were pretty ready to give up on Jalen Suggs. Maybe not fully, but give up on Jalen Suggs. And he's probably been the Magic's most impactful player, if not the second, if not behind Fultz, is the second most impactful player for the last 2-3 weeks now. These guys are so young. You got to give them time. And I feel like that's part of this season's story as much as anything else too.
Yeah, I think, Phil, everything that you've said there. What sticks out to me from all of that is like, and maybe I'm putting the question back on you now, but have, you seem to, and it's. I had never considered it this way. The way you phrased it, that was really interesting when you said, "Look, maybe the best thing is that they don't make the play-in tournament and they go next year. Okay, well, we came up short because some nights we didn't have it. So that's enough. I would say that's a glass half full way of looking at it, and it's a way that I hadn't always. So like you're showing a lot of optimism there for even if they come up short for putting the ball in Paolo's hands against Miami, even for Jalen Suggs. So do you feel good about where this team is right now? Because it's from the way we're talking now, I get the sense that you're happy with where they're at.
Yes, I like we discussed earlier. Like I think big picture, if I take a step back, like you have this conversation, like we're talking about things in a very different way than we talked about earlier in the year. Like to me,
Mm-hmm.
so much of this season, like if you asked me in October what the season was about, it was about two things. It was about learning to win and winning more for sure. But it was never about the win total. Like I expected them to surpass last year's win total, but it was never about, oh, we have to get to 35 wins to make the plan. Like that's not the goal. Those are nice things to have. If the team does that, that's certainly a sign that they were successful. But it was never about that. It was about having a better understanding of what you have and what you need to surround it to be successful, to experience winning at a higher level. So, okay, this works. This doesn't work. We need this to make Paolo better. We need this to make Franz better. And so, so much, like I tell a lot of people this, like you learn a lot in failure. And this team has obviously surpassed last year's win total. We're at a
Mm-hmm.
point where we expect them to win every game. Like it doesn't matter who they're playing. Like we believe they need to win games. Like I say this a lot on my podcast on Locked On Magic, so my listeners will know this. But you know, there's always like 5 or 6 things the Magic need to do to win games. It could be make 3-pointers. It could be win points to the paint, limit turnovers, offense rebounds, like whatever those things are. Like it's more this more abstract concept than anything else. And last year to win games, they had to do 4 or 5 of those 5 or 6 things. We're at a point now where the Magic have to do 3 or 4 of those things, where they have a little bit of a margin for error because they've got the talent, they've got the know-how, they've got the poise to compete. And so to me, like that is such a huge step forward. That is a big step forward. And, the goal for me at the end of the season was we need to exit the season understanding what the next step is, saying like we have a team that is capable of making the playoffs and capable of taking a huge step. We just need that last little bit to get over the hump. And obviously I think a lot of people would point to shooting. I know we talked about this for the trade deadline. I still think backup center is a massive need for this team. I not nothing against Mo Wagner. I like Mo Wagner a lot, but we could see how he struggles a little bit on the glass and some of his struggles on the interior. Taking a charge is about his only defense, and that's not great defense all the time. So I I am very happy with where this team's at. Like, again, if they finish 500 the rest of the year, or they get to, they settle at 34, 35 wins for the season, a 35-47 record, they're kind of on track for 35, 36 wins. If they settle in the mid 30s for a win total, that means they've taken a step there. But watching this team, like, it's so clear what this team needs and how this team evolves next year. And they've got the resources to go out and make things happen. And, I am interested to see how this team looks and operates when they do have to make some tough decisions. Obviously, I think this offseason, there will be talks for Cole Anthony to get an extension and just take care of it. And maybe that's the right move. Maybe that isn't. They'll have, tons of cap room to play with. They've got they'll have 2 first-round picks they could play with. I don't want the Magic to sit on their hands and say, like, hey, we made progress. Let's keep moving forward. They do need to address some very real needs, but we know what those needs are. And we know how this thing is theoretically going to look and work when they're ready to really compete for something real. And we're honestly very close to that point where they will be competing for something real sooner than later.
So do you think then, post All-Star break, then, if we talk, obviously we've spoken about what's come before and how, I guess, would it be fair to say that, Phil, we're in lockstep that it started off badly, but there's lots to be positive about? Would that be, you be in agreement with me there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if
absolutely.
we're talking post All-Star, then you like more of a, I don't know, even more clarity on the roles. Like the guard situation, for example, still confuses me a little bit. Like you mentioned Cole Anthony there. At this point in time, because Suggs has played so well recently and it's such recency bias, I'm thinking Markelle and Suggs as the backcourt is absolutely what I want to see going forward, at least in terms of starting. So, see in post All-Star just a bit more clarity around, the roles, who the 5 are, and winning some games off the back of that.
Yeah, so I think for the end of the season, like I obviously want to see the progress continue. Like I want to see this team continue to make steps, to finish out the season as if they're in a play-in chase. Like I want to see them feel that pressure. I want to see the organization put that pressure on these guys and say, like, hey, success or failure isn't based off of making the play-in tournament, but we're 4 games back. Let's make a push. Let's feel it. And that includes going to Jamal Mosley and saying, coach this team like every game matters. So if that means that, Jalen Suggs needs to start for Gary Harris, do that. If that means Jalen Suggs needs to finish a game, do that. If that means starters need to play 35 minutes instead of the 32 that they're playing, I know that's a big complaint, and I would agree with this, that Jamal Mosley maybe sticks with his bench a tick too long, even when the bench is playing well. Trying lineups that, maybe haven't played together, but have players that are playing well that just need to be out there to scratch out wins. Like I think the rest of the season is about putting that pressure. And it's not like over pressure where, if a guy doesn't perform, he's out. Like it's not like, let's say, Tobias Harris is always on the trade block for the Philadelphia 76ers because in the playoffs he kind of disappears. It's not like that. Like if someone doesn't rise to the occasion and this team misses the play-in tournament, it's a learning experience, not a death knell to their run with the Magic. Like, if Franz continues to struggle like he's been struggling, no one's putting him on the trade block because of that. Like we all know how good he is. He's been playing basketball nonstop since July. Like I think he's hit a wall a little bit here. His body's just tired and he needs this break as much as anyone else. But I think what we want to see is we want to see how this team responds to pressure. Like that's the great unknown. Like this team has been playing pressure free. Nothing matters. It's all found money. It's all good. It's all development. I want to see this team play under pressure. Like we've raised the expectations here. We've raised what we think this team can accomplish and what this team can be. Next year is going to have pressure. Next year, tell me if you agree with this. This team has shown enough this year that they should be a playoff team next year. They should be a top 8 team. We'll give them some leeway. Say a home game in the play-in tournament, like 7 or 8 seed. This team is good enough to be that in this league, and with the improvements that we expect both internally from this roster and externally from free agency in the offseason, they're going to feel pressure next year. So put that pressure, put a little bit of that pressure on them now, but make them feel it. Make them make them be that team. And I think that's what we want to see, because that's ultimately what's going to determine whether this whole thing is successful or not, and it's going to be the most valuable to them. Like, I know I said this during the tanking days so much, like, putting pressure on guys to win is the best way to learn who they are, and best way to learn your own weaknesses, honestly. Like, I especially after Tuesday night's game, I think a lot of people have questions about Wendell Carter. There were some questions that I brought up in the offseason, but have largely been ignored or pushed aside. And now it's like, well, Wendell Carter needs to be a better rebounder. Like, is he the big physical center? And I don't think that's like the most pressing question that this team has, but there's going to be opportunities in the offseason to go out and make deals. Like, I don't think this is the right idea, but like, DeAndre Ayton's always going to be available because he's clearly unhappy in Phoenix. That's a guy who's been in playoff battles before, isn't happy with his role in Phoenix, gives the Magic a little bit more size. Like, that may be a swap you think about. That may be something you think about. I'm not saying they do it. I'm not saying they should do it. This contract is a bit of a mess. And, is he going to be happy playing behind Paolo and Franz the same way he's playing behind Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and then to some extent Mikal Bridges and now Kevin Durant? Who knows what's going to happen? It's the NBA. Something crazy always does. But you do have to start thinking about these bigger questions, and you can't answer them unless you feel that pressure.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with you on all of that. What I think is interesting, and we somehow haven't mentioned him throughout this entire podcast, is like the reintroduction, obviously, of Jonathan Isaac. Not that he solves every defensive issue or all the rebounding issues, but some of the flashes have been something. It's not nothing, let me tell you. So yeah, it'll be interesting how he's integrated with that as well. And I suppose when I always think about beyond and the future and free agency, well, just the future, like, I don't know why I'm so focused on more the offensive side of things. Maybe it's my own, I don't know, seeing the Magic suffer for so long in that regard. But you're right, like, not that Carter has gotten a free pass or anything, but you're right. These are some of the tougher questions. A bit like Cole Anthony as well. Like a fine guard, a great player.
Like we talked about Markelle earlier. Markelle still has those questions. Like, Markelle is an expiring contract next year. Like he is, they're going to keep him around, but like, everyone's openly talked about bringing in Fred VanVleet, for whatever that's worth. It could be something, it could be nothing. But
and you know what's crazy is watching the game last night, and I don't know that if Fred VanVleet, sorry, is the big splash that you get. I kind of feel like that puts a glass ceiling or a ceiling of sorts on what you can be. And yet, at times last night, I was thinking, God, he's not too bad. Like,
no, he's fine.
He makes, like, he's a really good player, probably, but he's just not, to me, anyways. He's that level below.
He's a floor raiser, not a ceiling raiser.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I think
that's a better way of putting it.
Like we'll get into off-season stuff in April, May,
yes,
June.
Of course.
But like, getting a guy like Fred VanVleet, that makes you a playoff team. Like, Fred VanVleet on this Magic team, they're in the playoffs. Like, they got the talent. Yeah. Fred VanVleet's a good floor setter. He's a good defender. He's a good shooter. He knows when to have a big game, when the team needs him to have a big game. He knows when to take a step back. So he'd be, I don't think, in theory, I don't think he'd be a bad addition. The salary is always the concern. The length is the concern. The age is the concern. The health is the concern. And all that. And again, I think a lot of people still get obsessed with this timeline idea. I don't think you want players all on the same timeline. You don't want players that are all the same age, because then they start fighting for attention. Then they start fighting for, I want to be the guy. No, I want to be the guy. No, I want to be the guy. Like, that's what broke up Shaq and Penny, among other things. But you bring in a veteran, maybe a little bit higher price, but bring in a veteran, they've been there. Fred VanVleet's won a title. He knows what it's going to take to win a title. He's not interested in the individual glory. He knows the individual glory comes from team glory. You kind of need those guys on a young team like this, where, they don't understand everything. I still think the most impactful free agent signing in Magic history was Horace Grant. It's Rashard Lewis, but that was more because of how the Magic used Rashard Lewis, not that they signed him.
Yes.
Horace Grant to me changed that team. Like, Shaq and Penny were going to rocket to the moon. Bad choice of words. They were going to reach the moon eventually, because they were just so talented. They got there a whole lot faster because Horace Grant gave them the know-how, the understanding, the knowledge, the maturity to get there. And so, like, I always joke, like, the Magic need a Horace Grant. They need a guy that's been there. That's, Gary Harris has been in some of these battles before. they need a guy that's been there to help them get there. And just like, it's one thing when Jamal Mosley or the coaching staff says like, hey, this is what the playoffs are going to be like. These young guys are going to be like, sure. When one of their peers in the locker room is, pulling Paolo aside and saying, hey, we need you to step up tonight. This is your game. Like giving him that pep talk, that like hearing it from your peers is a lot more meaningful. And so I like, that's something the Magic should be looking for in the offseason. They need veterans. They're too young.
They do, and I definitely underestimated the importance of Gary Harris. I'm glad you brought him up there because I know he was injured for earlier in the season, and I always had this like belief, even though I'm not on the team, that Terrence Ross was some sort of like grandfather figure who was, moving them from practice to
He's
get
more a cool uncle.
and yeah, exactly. Sorry, my cool uncle is oh god, the cool uncle, not grandfather. But like just because he's gone now, I know Gary Harris is only 27, but he has a bit of that. At least it looks to me like he has a bit of that more veteran savvy know-how. He's been around other teams. He's been around winning to some degree. So there was probably a period of time where if you'd told me Gary Harris got traded, I would have said, brilliant. That's probably a first round pick. At least I would have hoped it was, or something. But I'm very glad he's actually still on the team, and I believe as well for the remainder of the season he'll have some say in if they do make the play in or not.
I know fans are very obsessed with getting Jalen Suggs into the starting lineup, but go look at Gary Harris's stats. He is having an
Yeah.
incredible shooting season. If anything, the Magic got to find a way to get him the ball more. I get frustrated. Yeah, like he's shooting, I think 3-3-pointers a game. He needs to get that up to like 5 or 6. Like the Magic need to find a way to get that up to 5 or 6 because that'll change everything. And honestly, like when he's getting those shots, it usually means the ball is moving to him and he's getting good looks and getting good opportunities. Yeah, it's obviously like just such a fascinating time for the Magic because we're in this period where we don't have the necessarily the pressure to win, but everyone sees it on the horizon. Like everyone sees how good this team can be on the horizon. Even like national media, who actually watch the Magic, actually watch the league. I'll leave out names on a 4-letter network that don't really seem to. But the group, the people that actually watch this team are like this team is good. Like they fly around. Like we talk about, a lot of our focus has been on offense, and that's for good reason because, after struggling so much at the start of the season, at least entering Tuesday night's game, which I will forget the defensive effort on Tuesday night, the Magic are 16th in the league in defensive rating all of a sudden. Like over the last 15 games, they're 10th in the league in defensive rating. Like their defense is starting to really piece together and come together. And once that happens, then the offense is going to come because the defense is going to generate that offense. And it's going to be interesting to see how this team really comes together. I think the best place to kind of close our discussion off is with, and we've talked around it a little bit here, is with Jamal Mosley, because I know that he's become a little bit of a lightning rod among Magic fans, as the coach always does. What do you think of the job that Jamal Mosley has done with this team this year, and with what this team was hoping to accomplish?
So for me, there were moments where I definitely worried. I'm not going to say can him. I'm not going to say let's overreact here, and I'm not even going to go back to again 5-20. But there were moments where I thought, have you stuck with this rotation too long? Have you stuck with this the rotations that you're going with, or really should you have made some subs before now? So there were definitely parts of it that, and still, by the way, sorry, that's still the case. There are times where his choices confuse me. But then again, he's an NBA head coach and I'm not, so I have to trust that he knows, what he's doing. And certainly in the last few months, it seems to me that his ability one-to-one to speak with people and like with his own players, yeah, like I'm happy with where the Magic are right now with him. I mean, this is what his second season. This was like overnight, he was never going to be a success. This was a young team that he's trying to mold into his vision. And some nights, I think you really do see that. Again, the inconsistencies frustrate, but I'm totally. He's not perfect. No head coach is, but he's for me the right man for where they are now. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but like if he was gone tomorrow for whatever reason, I would see that as a negative, and I do think that the team would take a step back, even if it was a small one. But I don't know if you agree with me on that. But certainly he's. I think he's won over some Magic fans as well, who were not happy. Again, it's social media is a very reactionist
Yeah,
place to be,
yeah.
anyways, as we all know. But there were people who definitely weren't a fan of him, and they still exist, of course. It's a little bit less.
Uh, so, I think what Mosley's done really well is the big picture stuff. Like
Hmm.
you want a team to get better, you want a team to improve over the course of a season. They have done that. They have taken real steps forward. They have been a really successful team on that front. And I've always been impressed with how Mosley keeps the big picture in mind. Like everything's big picture. Everything is like, well, we're going to run this because that's who we're going to be. And we want our players to have these thoughts and to see these reads. And if they're going to make mistakes now. Like now's the time to make your mistakes because the pressure is going to ramp up as the year goes on. And I think he's done a really good job teaching that. And you can see the results on the floor. Like we expect them to do better. We know that they can, and they've done that more consistently. I say this a lot about we say this a lot about the team. The team is young, the coach is young too. Like this is his second year as a head coach, and the first time where he's like the players, the first time he's in a situation where he's expected to win, where winning is not just an unlikely outcome or a mythical outcome. It's an actual outcome that's going to happen, and so I think we're seeing him go through his growing pains as a game manager, understanding understanding rotations, when to take a risk, when to go for it. Like I would agree with some of the game management criticisms he has, like sticking with the bench a tick too long, not bringing in starters in quickly. Honestly, like Saturday night against the Heat, he should have picked up a technical foul in the third quarter. I think he fights for his team in different ways, but sometimes coaches pick up strategic technical fouls. I don't think I've seen Jamal Mosley do that once. And I mean, that might sound silly. That may not be a psychology he believes in, but I do think that says a lot. And especially in a home game, that charges the crowd. Like that energizes the crowd when the coach goes to bat. Like, some coaches know to do this. Get ejected once. Like if you're really upset about something, you want to show your players you're fighting for them, get ejected. I do like that Mosley does keep an even keel. Like having said that, Mosley keeps an even keel, and it like as much as I disagree with Shaq's master of panic comment about Stan Van Gundy, I do
Hmm.
agree with this point that the team takes on the personality of their coach. You know, Stan Van Gundy Stan Van Gundy is a brilliant tactician, but I do think in the finals and in meaningful games, he'd sometimes go over the top, and the team reflected that. The team lost its composure with that. Jamal Mosley is so cool and even keeled that even through crazy waves, he stays steady, and that's important for a young team. So I think that we will see Mosley improve with all this, and like I said earlier, I think that we are at a really interesting point with this group where the big picture stuff still matters more, but we also want to see this team win, and there's an achievable, tangible goal for this team to grab. And we want to see this team reach that goal and grab that goal. And I think at times Mosley isn't coaching to get there. Isn't coaching to get the top seed, to get into the play-in tournament or win an individual game, because he's thinking about this big picture that's out there. But sometimes you just got to go out and win a game. I don't think we've seen him coach that way. And honestly, I'd like to see more of that after the All-Star break now. Yes, he's managing some injuries, and yes, he's managing minutes, but the Magic have 2 back-to-backs the rest of the season. I think we could see him really lean on players that he trusts and on groups that he trusts to go out and get more wins, and to experiment with that. Honestly, like there's still no pressure. Go experiment with it a little bit. Try it for a little while. See how far you can push this team to get them that tangible goal. It's
Hmm.
it's small things for sure, but I think this team is still largely winning isn't the main goal. Development is, and I think that's kind of the tension between fans and this coaching staff a little bit. But I think we are seeing a shift where maybe the Magic should care more about wins than development, and Mosley's got to learn how to coach a winning team again.
Hmm. And just to add to that very quickly, I think it will be interesting if next year the team start off slow. How quickly it will be. You got to win more games, because whatever about how we feel about that now, yeah, the pressure from here on out with the need to win games will only increase. So if Mosley is still experimenting or doing these things next year, fans and probably the front office are going to be less forgiving if he's not changed his mindset to let's win that Miami game and put the ball in Markelle Fultz's hands more, or whatever it may be. And I actually wasn't aware that he hadn't. If that is correct, that he hasn't received a technical, I very much subscribe to the belief.
I'm sure he
I
has,
can't remember
but
myself.
like I can't remember. I'm sure he
Neither can I.
has, but like that, like maybe he doesn't believe in that psychology. Maybe
True.
he's more concerned about keeping a level head because he saw how his team was getting rattled. But sometimes you got to fight for your guys. Sometimes you just gotta. Sometimes you just gotta. You gotta do something to spark some energy. You gotta do something to just let your guys know that you have their
within
back.
reason. Now, Phil. Within reason. Let's not
within
talk
reason.
about fighting
Within reason.
Podcast. Let's not talk about fighting. To end this podcast.
Well, I mean, we got rid of our fighters last week, I guess. Apparently Austin Rivers still runs this town. I was not aware. Luke, I appreciate you coming on and appreciate all the coverage that you've been giving us at Orlando Magic Daily. It's like we're at I think we both agree this team is at a really good spot. And there's a lot of excitement to come and a lot of growing to come and very achievable growth to come from this group. So it's a good time to take a pause and recognize all that this team's accomplished, as well as think about what's to come and what's ahead and what what's going to shift and change here as the Magic take their next steps. Luke, where can everyone find you if they want to contact you and see your work and everything else?
Well, writing for Orlando Magic Daily, and you'll find probably some things to disagree with me with, as some Magic fans love to do. On Twitter at Luca Lockhart, which I know is a strange name. It's not my name. Luca Lockhart, LucaLockHart. If you want to tell me why I'm awful for saying some of the things I've said, so yeah, you can find me there.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely that. Check out his coverage as well as OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow us there on Twitter. I still control the Old Magic Daily account, but you can follow us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. Luke, like myself, I think we both share this philosophy as far as interacting with our audience. Is we will field questions. We're happy to hear your arguments why you disagree. We're happy to hear why you agree. We are both commenters and want to interact with you guys. So definitely reach out to Luke if you see anything that he writes and you want to let him know about asking him a question or anything, just as much as you can ask me a question at any point too. I want to thank you all for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic, though. When you're done for the latest, let me get through my spiel here. Thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, all of the places on our podcast to your podcast-enabled device. Of course, subscribe to it as well on YouTube. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, of course, check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. Now that you're done listening to us, be sure to check out the Game to Game NBA podcast. All the scores from around the NBA with analysis from the local experts who know their team best. Check it out on the Locked On NBA feed wherever you download podcasts. That's Game to Game NBA. On behalf of Luke, I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. For Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.